Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. My guest today is going to tell us a little bit about himself and his experience with family when he came out as transitioning to male. So, guest, tell us just a bit about yourself.
Hi, so thank you so much for having me on. My name is Cade. I am a trans man who has been medically transitioning since September 29th of 2020. And I work at a retirement community in Seattle, and I'm going back to school for nursing here in the next following months.
And as I shared with you, I'm so excited about that. So
Yeah.
I know that your story is about, some of the things that have happened with your family and your experiences once you came out to them as trans and kind of explained to them, who you are and then how they reacted. So tell us a bit about that experience, kind of what has happened, how the relationship has been affected, and so on.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate and mostly grew up in a household where acceptance was universal, whether that was coming out as gay or coming out as a lesbian or coming out, as a different religion. I grew up in a home where religion was not necessarily enforced. My parents wanted me and my sister to be able to experience that on our own and make the paths for ourselves. So I came out officially in 2019, the very beginning of 2019, as a trans man. And my parents were originally kind of shocked by it, but they were ultimately accepting. It wasn't until I started medically transitioning at the end of 2020 that my younger sister had a huge problem with it. Um, my sister is younger, about 3 years, and she is married to a man who is hyper religious, to the point of, you know, if it's in God's plan, we're going to have as many children as humanly possible, kind of religious affiliation. So when I came out to her originally, she did not interact with me or talk to me for the first 3 months of my transitioning. Um, when I had asked her to be my matron of honor for my wedding, it took her an additional 2 months to kind of get back to me. Then she proceeded to inform me that I was going to confuse her children, that her religion, her family did not agree with me transitioning, and that I was essentially a abomination. And I was the sister that she had to mourn now, and I wasn't dead yet. Um, Everyone else in my family, excluding my aunt, has been very accepting, and I believe that you have actually seen some of the things via Facebook,
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
she has said. Um, but yeah, it was very interesting having grown up in the same household as her, learning that we accept everybody, that religious affiliation or gender or sexuality doesn't matter. For her, 20, she's 29 now. We haven't talked for about 3 years. So she was 26, a 26-year-old who I had spent my entire formative years with, to just kind of cast me aside just because I didn't identify with what I saw in the mirror. So yeah.
So were you close before this? I mean, you obviously grew up together. Were you close siblings? I mean, you were going to ask, or you had asked her to be your matron of honor. So that's an honorable thing to ask. So how was your relationship before all of this came to be?
So our entire family was extremely close. Since the family has kind of fractured, we had had family doctors say, like, to like my mom being like, you had the picture perfect family, like you all were very close and interactive in each other's lives. You were very honest with one another and you kept everybody in the loop. And so it genuinely came as a shock to everybody in our not only immediate circle but our extended circle, that this was the straw that essentially broke the camel's back for my sister to run from the family. Essentially was my choice, and quote unquote my choice to transition. um most
So is your
everybody that I
sister,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Most everybody else, what? No, go ahead.
Oh, most everybody else has been fine with it, so it was just surprising.
So has this changed your sister's relationship with the rest of your family or just with you?
With the entire family.
The entire family.
um
So in essence, she has like given up not only her relationship with you, but with other family members because of this.
yes, so I'm the second youngest of 27 first cousins. It's a huge family, and my sister is therefore the youngest. She's the 27th. um but she is um distanced herself from literally everyone in the family, not just my parents, um, but also my cousins who we were really close with growing up, my aunts and uncles, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind to me, I mean, your sister saying that she needed to mourn her sister dying, but you actually weren't dead. I've heard this phrase in families where a trans individual comes out to their families but it's mostly been, I have to mourn the previous person and now I'm welcoming the new person. So usually, that thing, well, this is no longer my sister, this is now my brother, or no longer
Right.
my daughter, it's now my son, right? Whereas with your sister, it was more, I can't accept anything other than the fact that this person, was my older sister, and therefore, I can't move past that. So I'd like to know, kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to guess that would be hurtful to have that happen, especially with someone that you've grown up with, that you were close to. Um, kind of not only just, I mean, you use the word abomination, for heaven's sake, that's a terrible word. That how that impacts you when you are in and of yourself, learning all of these new things about yourself and who you are, to have someone, do that. I'm just, how does that impact you, or has that impacted you?
Yeah. You know, you thankfully we're on a podcast all about grief. Um, but you go through the array of emotions. You go through losing your sister and also saying goodbye to part of yourself. My view of myself as a trans person, which I cannot say is the same for everyone, I pay homage to my female self because without her, I could not have gotten to this point. Um, Growing up and seeing the strife and things that she went through made me realize the man that I wanted to be for the rest of the world and for myself. So when she went ahead and said that I was an abomination and that she had to mourn her sister for me still being alive, of course, I felt sad and angry, and I bargained, and I finally accepted it through lots and lots of therapy. I had a partner that is and was very, very supportive through the entire thing. And they identify as non-binary. Um, but yeah, it was a struggle. It was, and there's still moments where, even to this day, 3+ years later, I still contemplate whether or not I want to reach out to her. and try to seal things over just to see how she was or see how she's doing. I think the hardest part of all of it was there was no acceptance at all when it came to me being around her kids. That was a shot to the heart that I wasn't expecting. She went on to say that it would be too confusing for the children to have me one day be Auntie, so and so, and now Uncle Cade the next day, as if it was flipping and flopping daily. Well, that's just not, and it's not how it worked with me. There are plenty of trans people that detransition, and that's their choice. But, I've been fairly consistent, I would say, over the course of 3 years. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's hard.
unfortunately, I would think that the way the kids are being raised is part of why we have, some of the ignorance, if I'll use that term, in our society, in our culture, with people not realizing, that we're all different and that's
Mhm.
okay. So
Yeah.
it I don't it hurts my heart to think about those kids growing up, not having their uncle and not, be experiencing that sense of openness that it sounds like your family had when you were growing up. Um,
Yeah.
that's unfortunate. Like I said, it hurts my heart to think about that for kids especially. So um,
Yeah.
the whole thing about the kids being confused, that comment actually irritates me, to be honest with you, where it's like,
Yeah.
and again, you make that comment about, this choice of doing this. It's like, some things aren't a choice. It's understanding who you are and being honest with that, right?
Mhm.
So it's obvious that, I don't know whether it's because of, her religious and the husband, whatever, but obviously the sister's not really clear on that, not very clear on that. So when you talk about you reaching out to her, I'm curious, would you be thinking about doing that because you want to get back to having a close relationship with her? And if so, do you think it's possible?
So I think more or less it's a matter of seeing how she's doing because I've listened to your podcast prior, and people who are isolated from their family or isolated from people that genuinely care for them, um, it's harder for them to leave.
Yeah.
And while I'm not necessarily saying that there are other things that are going on behind closed doors, I hope and I pray that there is not. But there is that portion of me that I'm comfortable in my own skin and I'm happy with the person that I have grown into. This was never really her. And that is jarring to think of. So I think that me wanting to reach out for her to her is not necessarily me trying to get close to her again, because I think that based off of interactions that we have had, that time of closeness is a little bit more guarded now. I think that I want her to have the same type of happiness that I have in my transition with the people that is around her. And I'm not sure that she's getting that. And that's unfortunate. There's also a part of me that does think about the kids. There is, I believe, 4 of them at this point, 3 of which I've never met. And if anything happens as far as those kids coming out as queer or in any facet of the LGBT community, and they feel like they have nowhere to go, I would hope that they would find me, because I'd take them in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And
So
the suicide rate for especially young people in the LGBTQ community is so high
mhm,
for reasons very similar to what you just mentioned, and that again hurts my heart a lot.
yeah.
So, how have you kind of gotten to the point where you can put, I mean, especially I keep going back to that abomination comment, which just like, oh my God. How do you get to the point where you can like say, okay, that's her. how do you not be hurt by those comments? Or, I mean, obviously, if you are hurt, how do you get past that and realize, that's her opinion, that's her, religion or whatever speaking, and that's not really, who or what I am. How do you get to that space?
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest, lots of therapy. Um, I am a huge advocate for therapy, especially for people in the LGBTQIA community, um, because it's isolating and it makes you feel like you're alone. And the thing is that you're not alone. There's plenty of people inside of the community that either identify as you or have gone through something similar, um, that feels like it breaks people. And to bring up the statistic, it's 73% of youth will attempt suicide in the LGBTQIA community,
Wow.
because of matters in regards to this. They're either forced from their homes or they feel like they have no one, and there are dozens, if not hundreds, of resources out there to be able to make sure that you're safe and
Yeah.
heard and validated. Um, I thankfully have a partner that is also part of the LGBTQIA community. Um, and they've gone through, you know, mispronouncing pronouns or things along those lines. And it wasn't until I moved to Seattle that I realized that there's an entire group of people that are similar to me. Um, Family, even if you don't feel like you have one right now, it there is a family waiting for you that will help you through it. Um, you just take it 1 minute at a time, and eventually it gets easier. The pain is still there, but eventually you'll get through it.
Yeah, and the comment about, your sister making the comment that, this is your choice. I don't know why anyone would choose to go through something like that, right? It's like,
Yeah,
if it's like, I don't know, you know what I'm talking about, but it's kind of like people to say that that's a choice you would make. Who would choose to have this, divide with someone that they, love and have grown up with? No one would choose that, right? So
no,
it's like for that to be the thought process, or whatever, that part is frustrating, I think. And um part of what I also want to make sure that is, when we air this episode, we're going to include some resources for especially young people that might be in the same situation, where how can they find resources that might be helpful to them. So we're definitely going to include that. But
yeah.
one other question I have for you is, um, if you were talking to a trans individual, whether that's young, I don't care, whatever age, and that person is thinking about, coming out because they've realized who they are, but they're
Mhm.
afraid that they're going to
Yeah,
have this unacceptance, whether it's family, friends, coworkers, whatever. What
mhm.
advice, what would you say to them? I mean, it's never going to be easy, but
No,
what would you say would be, you would say, well, you definitely want to do this. You definitely don't want to do this. Is there anything along those lines that you can share?
yeah. Um, Finding someone you trust and who loves you no matter what, and practicing with them first. I was very fortunate to come out to my partner, and I wavered. I struggled. And at first, I thought that I was gender fluid. And then I was like, no, I'm just a lesbian. And then I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. And I was open and honest about my struggle with someone who I could trust explicitly, whether that is, a counselor, whether that's somebody in the community, whether that's, a family friend, whether that's, pick your person. Um, but for us in the LGBTQ community, we don't come out just once. We come out every time we see someone we care about. You'll come out multiple times throughout your life. And that's really hard. The thing that I encourage people to do is just take it 1 minute at a time. And at the end of the day, it's just a bad day. It's not a bad life, because now you're living your truth. And living in the closet and in the shadows kills the soul. And I would rather be a resource for people in our community to come and talk to, um, than to hear about another one of us passing. I I will happily like give up my email address as well. I will even make one to be able to support anyone in the LGBTQIA community who needs it, who listens to this podcast. Um, because just having one person to kind of bounce ideas off of is really important, and it saves lives.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure. I've know a number of people. I have a very good friend who's a gay man, who was raised Mormon, and his
wow.
experience with his family has been really not good, not good.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to, certainly beliefs and cultural things, whatever, where people are just simply unable to accept something, it's, you know, it's going to take time. I guess I'd say it's like interrelation or interracial marriages, for example, whatever. Those
Mhm.
are now the norm, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, 50 years ago, it was against the law. So,
Right.
some of this is kind of like, I'd like to hope that when my children have children of their own, that the conversation you and I are having will seem weird, because they'll be like, wait, what? People are doing what?
Yeah.
What? Why were they doing that way back then? When you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'd like to hope we evolve to at some point in time. Um, but I do want to acknowledge how you felt, with losing a relationship, and yeah, I appreciate you want to reach out to the sister, because I agree that checking in on her is probably a good idea, but I also would think that you need to think about your own well-being, and
Mhm.
you aren't responsible for her, and that sort of thinking too comes into mind for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, um, is there anything else you would like to add? Anything you would want to say to someone who's just coming out as trans, or another member of the LGBTQ community, or um, family members, anything that you would want to share? I know you've mentioned counseling and
Mhm.
resources and so on, but um, I just curious, because I'm so impacted by the fact that there's such a high rate of self-harm in that community, and I'd like to think that there's a positive message that can be imparted
Yeah.
here to help people.
Absolutely. Live your truth. Your truth. No one else looks at you or looks back at you in the mirror every day. And just because it's hard to come out, and you're going to come out multiple times, it's worth it to be who you feel that you are. And you're valid, and you're important, and your voice matters. And I have a genuine hope that this up and coming generation, I mean, I'm a millennial, but this up and coming generation of people in their, early 20s, even 18, they're an incredible generation that I truly believe that will change the face of what LGBTQIA individuals um, will experience in the next 10 years. Um, if you don't feel safe, find someone you feel safe with. If you need, there's plenty of Facebook groups and things for LGBTQIA individuals, whether that's teens, adults, or otherwise. And there are hundreds, thousands of allies out there that would rather listen than to hear another statistic. I'm proud of you for coming out. I'm proud of you for being who you are, because it's not easy. And like you said, it's no one would choose this if we had a choice. But don't be another statistic. You're worth it. You are somebody, and you're
Yeah,
loved.
And there are plenty of us out there, when you use the term ally, plenty of us out there that would be just honored to have someone reach out to us to say, hey, I need to talk to someone about this, who's not going to judge me, who's not going to, you know, say I'm wrong or immoral or an abomination. I can't get over that term.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. There are many people in the ally community who are certainly willing to, it's a safe zone to,
Hmm.
come and find us, and we'll hear your story.
Yeah.
So that definitely would be my message as well for this. So I am truly sorry that your sister has made her choices. Um, I feel bad for her kids, because I think that, for us to move forward as a society with cultural acceptance takes parents teaching their children that, we're different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just keep perpetuating, the judgmental, whatever. And that's
Yeah.
a bad thing, because kids learn from an early age, what they know, which
Yeah.
anyway. So
I
I
agree.
want to thank you so much, Cade, for this podcast interview. I know, of course, I've had you come and talk to my students in my class before, and your presentations are always everybody's favorites for the class. So I appreciate your openness and the things that you share, um, the resources you provide, and so on. So thank you, thank you for being here, and I appreciate everything you had to say.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of the book, The Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. You can find the book on Amazon and Kindle.